Summer is in full swing over at Middleman Records with new releases from Worn Through, Process Sleep, and Coma of Iris. But that's not all. For the first time ever on cassette, you can pick up Akameli's For Now and Ever discography, as well as the Lacrima Cartography release, Body of Wasps LP, It Ends and So It Begins Again, and Keiki Obadi's We Kill Ourselves with Compassion. And if that wasn't enough, you can also pick up a second press of last year's Tragedy of Catharsis by Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. So head over to middlemanrecords.bandcamp.com where you can find all that and more. Hello, and welcome to Everything Remade, a podcast that I hope is about growth as much as it is about music. I'm Edie Quinn, and we have a great show lined up for you today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to remind you about our Patreon page at patreon.com/humanmachine, where you can go to sign up and support the show and get music sneak peeks, read zines, and so much more. That's patreon.com/humanmachine. And now, I'd like to play something for you. You're hearing High Tiny by Skimp, featuring my pal Donovan Ford on guitar. The song comes from their new album, Very Much So and How, which you can find on Bandcamp, as well as a music video for the song on YouTube.
My family's always been really, like musically inclined, though kind of casual in actual performance. My dad played in bands when he was, like in his teens and 20s. And, he then later worked for like a record distributor. There was an independent distro out of Sacramento, California called Mordan. And so like from a very early age, I was just being fed like huge quantities of music. And he played bass, and so I always, he would speak about playing bass. And then growing up, my best friend Charles also played bass, so I was like, well, I should probably play bass. And it was a very casual, like my mom wanted me to do orchestra, so I played the double bass because she said, if you do this for a year, I'll get you an electric. And I thought being in a punk band was cool. But there was a light bulb moment in a different sense for me that I can very clearly define, where it was the first time I ever played 1919 Hemphill. And it was like a light bulb moment in I want to be doing this thing. In that, so I had been playing in like little bands starting in like middle school with just like friends I knew. And then that sort of evolved into like, taking that a fair more seriously in like middle of high school. And we would play whatever shows that existed around. And through that process of playing at like, I think a converted furniture store next to a mini mart that like some burnout was running as like a pseudo venue, essentially hosting like whoever wanted to host shows. Mm-hmm. We met these kids who knew about like the DIY scene and joined me and Miles DeBruin, who plays in Skimp. Mm-hmm. Joined their band called Kids of Cons, and one of the other members of that band begged this guy Rick V, who ran the calendar at 1919 along with other people. It was a volunteer run space, to just get on a show. And so we got on a show, and this like I think my senior year of high school, 2009 I believe is when. And so Miles is like a year younger than me. And we neither of our parents wanted us to like drive to Fort Worth. So the guitar player Taylor picked us up from our house, our various houses, and drove over there. And we played with O Pioneers and Bridge and Tunnel, and then County Lines was the other local band. They were from Fort Worth, who still people I casually know to this day. And it was like that experience of like going to like a DIY show with a touring band or two, and then seeing also like O Pioneers and Bridge and Tunnel, who were both very good in 2009, just floored me. And then also the alternative experience of being like, oh, this isn't like a show at the Door Dallas where it's a battle of the bands that you pay $25 in and they don't let you outside.
Right.
Like this is a lot more my speed with how this is supposed to go. And everybody there just treats you like you're just there and you're supposed to be there or something. That was the true light bulb moment. And then it's like, oh, I want to play like punk shows in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And then that's truly where it was all downhill from there, so to speak.
Did you meet any folks from Bridge and Tunnel at that show?
I bought a 7-inch from them, but didn't really like talk to them because I was 17 and like wide-eyed and just being like, "Hi, I'm happy to be here."
You're just like, this is the first time I've seen something like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend Al played bass in that band.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Al used to be in a band called Nakatomi Plaza as well, and they were fucking great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was I mean, it's hilarious. And there was like a recent like sort of sad full circle moment to that where like I think didn't like the guy from O Pioneers start a print shop and like kind of union bust like not long ago.
Oh, I don't know.
It was some like minor controversy.
I only know that band by name. I don't think I've ever checked them out.
It was yeah. I think tangentially in the same sort of like DIY circles that happened in 1919. Although it was a lot of folk punk back then, from what I recall.
Yeah. Well, you said Rick V. Is that like someone that do you still know much about that person? Like, do they?
Oh yeah.
Do they do like writing for Razor Cake and stuff or something like
that?
Yeah,
yeah. Rick Van.
Oh my god. Yeah, that's awesome. Lives in Bloomington now, I think, right?
Yeah. That was where Rick moved after Fort Worth. But yeah, I met Rick because Rick was like heavily involved with running 1919 Hemp Hill, and so like Rick begrudged tiny high school me and would like put my goofy bands on random shows and then do really cool flyers that I would save like copies of and
that's amazing.
Tape to my wall. Yeah.
Rick is also the only person that's ever reviewed one of my zines in another zine. So like it was this comic that I did about like I wrote it like secondhand, but it's made up experiences like based on like real experiences that like my wife talked about this like unit that she worked in where there was like only one person who knew how to use this like particular dialysis machine.
Oh yeah.
And so but I don't know.
Yeah,
it's really cool. Small
like,
world.
Just historically nice person is the thing. Like and so definitely like his kindness and sort of like picking up the ethos from people like Rick V and Al Rios was very, very influential to me as a young man.
Yeah, I gotta.
I can't give enough credit to those two people. Basically,
I gotta like we gotta do a crossover or whatever where I have Rick on this podcast because there's got to be like just tons of stories for sure.
I mean, like the amount of overlapping circles was inconceivable from like just like I don't know. You probably know, especially now the Indiana aspect is even funnier.
Yeah, it's wild. And I mean,
it's not just DIY.
Right. It does make sense that he would end up in Bloomington because it's like the most like progressive area in Indiana, probably.
Yeah, it has the lineage of Planet X as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So you kind of just like found your way into this band and then found your way into like the scene that you would more or less be a part of for like well over a decade at this point.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, were you just like playing bass in the beginning, or were you like you got started with bass and you immediately started learning how to play other things as well, or
I really did focus a lot on bass,
yeah?
honestly. That was like kind of what I mostly played until like I think about 2013 is when Joy Source started, and that's
Mm,
when I started learning guitar. But I kind of specifically only played bass for quite a while, and it mostly just like trying to be good at one thing
mm,
versus trying to pick up a bunch of things, and then I just started playing guitar because it sounded fun, and a friend wanted to start a band where like he had never played bass, our friend had never played drums, and I'd never played guitar, so that was the whole point. And
okay,
so it was that freeing aspect that kind of like, oh, you can learn how to do other things. That's cool.
yeah,
But yeah, no, I just played bass in a lot of different bands because it's really easy to join a band on bass. And so you can very suddenly become like, yeah, I'm playing in four different bands and I've got three shows every week and it's fun.
yeah,
And when
yeah.
you're 18, that's like what you want to do.
Were were you were you writing a lot of songs like bass first, like bass forward, or were you just like sort of slotting in wherever you could
Yeah,
play?
I didn't really write much. There was like a band that we did where it was all like sort of written collaboratively, but it wasn't, I didn't really start writing songs on my own, like, start to finish. Here's the idea of a song until like well into, I don't know, like 2013, 2014 with in a band I was in called Bad Times. I just like wrote a song for it.
Hmm.
That's kind of like when I conceive like it's like really truly starting that. Whereas if everything else was sort of like small efforts in that regard.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I was mostly just kind of filling in and playing, but it was a lot of like input in the terms of like what songs were being written, and also, I mean, for the most part, I guess I just wrote all my own bass parts, but.
Yeah,
It was a very fulfilling role in that sense, and that
yeah.
I just wanted to play music with other people.
I don't mean to downplay like
No, yeah,
that at all.
it,
Playing bass is so different, and I asked that question mostly because like I I can and do play all the instruments in a standard rock band or whatever, right? And
yeah.
I've written songs where like I'll just throw down the drums and then I'll write the songs over them later, like without
Yeah.
much involved. But I can't do that with bass. I can have a cool riff, and I have to have the guitars or whatever do the rest of it. I just can't. Like
Well,
can come up with a part, right? And I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
that's a part. Like this is a good whatever it is. But
I feel like it did lend an element in how I do end up writing songs, in that like it when you do write and you end up writing something like on a bass, it ends up kind of almost inherently being sort of like a riff centered songwriting like focus, not necessarily like the song doesn't have parts, it only has riffs, but like you kind of, the central part ends up being that riff, and then you kind of structure everything around that.
hmm
I see that in the sense of instruments that lend themselves to like playing single strings at a time, although you can play chords on bass, of course, but
hmm
it kind of creates like what is the central structural element of your songwriting, because I hear that in when I'm writing songs on guitar anyway. It's like, where's the riff, where's the inner riff
hmm
to all of this, and that's definitely from the bass player, that like at my very origin point.
yeah.
So like it's kind of always there for me now. Because like when I did start writing songs, I was still writing them on the bass and then just envisioning guitar parts and telling the guitar player what to play. Like it was like not even like trying to like write them. I'm like, I'm thinking, and then I would just try playing an octave up on a bass.
hmm
Because again, it was what I was familiar with. And so like the first song I ever brought to the table in that context, it was just kind of like this. But it was also sort of like a 1 minute long idea. so it needed, more threshing out, and so
Yeah.
it took a really long time for me to write over anything over like 2 minutes through that sort of like, I'm thinking about this as rudimentarily as possible.
Hmm.
And then after a while it gets easier. Plus I started like trying to focus on how to record myself, and through that process you have like, you end up necessitating learning how to do all of the other bits, so that kind of structures out, your perception of writing
Yeah.
in a way that like really helps.
Yeah. Uh,
Multi-instrumentalism does pay off in the end.
yeah. I mean, it was necessary for me because I'm constantly like, there's never been like three other people in Lafayette like that I would be able to play with, so it's just
Right, yeah.
like that. But on the inverse of all that, like for the first time I've written, like I wrote drums, right? And then somebody else wrote the bass. Like, so I just like wrote some drums and sent them to a bass player. And the bass player sent back like the bass guitar over the drums. And
Hmm.
so for the first time, I'm doing like, here's this song that's written bass first, and it's
Yeah,
not necessarily like extremely riffy, like we were saying before. So there's not a there's not like so much to follow. So it's like,
yeah,
in one way, this is really like, wow, you can just do whatever you want, and I'm kind of used to that anyway. But at the other end of it, you're like, I'm kind of like, I don't necessarily have this person like on hand 24 hours a day to be like, am I taking this too far? In,
yeah. You
so
get the creative constraint from,
yeah,
it's just like, here's what I got back.
yeah.
uh,
So it's,
which is also like totally freeing in that
uh
like
huh,
someone else's interpretation, if you let it be that much of the interpretation, so much is out of your hands, and that's kind of nice in a sense, in that it's like, I like what you came up with and I never would have thought about it. In fact, it recontextualizes what I was doing.
mm-hmm. And that's
That's
why we
fun.
play with other people,
Yeah,
because we want to be, like,
yeah,
you would just do it all yourself if you wanted it to be your, your idea
yeah.
of what should happen.
And especially now, like with the lack of like, kind of things that inhibit that, like, being able to work entirely in the box on a $400 laptop, you can kind of just do whatever you want, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As long as you work within your own constraints, you can kind of create the music you want to hear, ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it just kind of lacks that like sort of element of surprise, or like the sort of social character of playing music,
Yeah.
which is so much of it. But I don't know. Like I have a friend Britt that would just like put together full albums where he would just like get a drummer to come in and like, hey, play something like this, and the drummer would just essentially play like some patterns, and then he would write like some guitar riffs over it, and then like months later get someone to come in and just sing whatever they thought they wanted to on top of it. And so you'd end with these like absurd piecemeal songs that were also constructed over like years. And then eventually it's like, he would put out a record. And I always thought it was like such a out of left field way of like assembling this, in that you're just kind of like leaning on random chance,
Yeah.
which is cool. I mean, but it is also like, yeah, the album sounds all over the goddamn place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it's awesome how many ways that you can do this. I mean, that process sounds kind of like how we did the drums for the latest like Derosine recording. Like we had Dylan, like Dylan and I were at my old place, and we were there, and we were like texting with like Adam, from like Carrie Ann Spring and stuff, who is the vocalist. We were texting with Adam like, what should we have Dylan play now? And Adam would be like, oh, play like something like this or like this. And so we're like just giving Dylan prompts, but also Dylan is like a like master like at improvisation. So like we're giving
Yeah.
Dylan these prompts, but also there's like all these just wild like blasts and blast stops and all this other stuff happening too. And then like later I'll just write like I'll just essentially write in a like in a fugue state almost, just like from start to end, and I'll go back later and see what works and what didn't.
Yeah.
And then you can have another thing where it's just like you're total, it's like you know everything you're going to do before you even start hit record, you know? So
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, like when that aforementioned friend Britt, he asked me to do vocals on two of the songs on that album that he put together in that fashion. It was a band called Most Efficient Women, which I think is I don't know, it's a reference to some other band's song title. But anyway, like he just sent me this track. And so like he kind of, didn't give me any guidance. And so I just kind of listened to it. And this kind of became like, this was very early at me, like starting to write like lyrics for myself. I think I had written like maybe, 4 songs. And so I just kind of listened to it in my car for a while in a parking lot. Just like, isolated myself in the true way, a DFW suburbanite can. And like just kind of like heard the words that came out of the song in my head and then wrote that down, and that's what I performed. And that kind of became like I would write a song, and then eventually like you kind of get the words out by simply listening to the song. It became like a method of like how I would write, because like you speak out of necessity of recording with yourself. I started doing that a lot in 2020 for reasons that are obvious to probably everyone in the world.
Yeah. So when you're saying like hear the words, were you getting these like flashes in? Were you getting like syllabic like things, or were you getting like the whole word? Was it coming to
the
you
whole
in?
word, like kind of just like interpreting or like listening for what's going on in my head in tune to the song in a way that is very difficult to describe.
Yeah.
And that it's just kind of like, and eventually some things start to like cohere. It's like it starts as like a constellation of just sort of thoughts and like distant things, and you eventually kind of get lines that you're starting to hear. I guess that's how I interpret it in my own head. I know some other people, like Parker, for instance, will write a song and then essentially write a vocal melody on a synthesizer, and then through that process of like thinking about it a bunch, eventually the lyrics just kind of appear.
Yeah, I often do like I'll do passes where I'm just like vocalizing like whatever weird sounds I think are gonna
Yeah.
happen. And
I think that's how like Brian Eno and Torch both wrote lyrics.
yeah. I think it's definitely how the second Sunny Day Real Estate album happened, because like there's no official, apparently there's like no official lyrics for that album.
Oh,
And
fantastic.
everything that went down, like they were it was like I don't know, the story is that they recorded that album and they recorded the vocal takes that you hear on the finished album as like this is like what they always did, where he would just lay down some melodies and then he'll go back later and he'll write the actual words. But by that time that first run through went, they decided that the band was going to break up, and they were under the contract or whatever to finish the album. So the story is that they were just like, well, you got it, like just put it out like that then. And like they've played those songs on like reunion tours and stuff. So obviously he wrote some lyrics at some point, but like I just thought it would be funny, especially because they did that
Oh yeah.
live version of Diary last year. So you're like, whenever the 25th or 20th, whatever anniversary it is that they did of Diary, they did the live version. If you if they follow that up with a live version of the Pink album, we'll get some actual lyrics
Like
possibly.
literal closure, like in like
Right.
you ever watch Twin Peaks?
No, that's one of those ones where like I've tried to start it and I feel like intimidated. Like I'm
It's
like, what if I don't
very
get it?
understandable.
You know?
Well, you don't have to get it. You vibe it out. It's all
Okay.
emotions. That's the
Okay.
important thing with Twin Peaks. Like there is no the impulse to interpret it is false. You have to just feel it. And
Okay.
so it is totally like a warm feeling of a show. But there's a component of it, or like this one part where essentially an essential character just says to the main character, "I'll see you again in 25 years." And then the return came out 25 years after like the original series, and it like was essentially David Lynch like answering all these questions that people like sort of badgered about. Like there's a bunch of other things with the return that are great. It's one of the greatest TV seasons ever, in my opinion. But he was sort of like answering every fan question, whether they liked it or not. And so it's like funny to get that from Sunny Day Real Estate again, in that it's like, oh yeah, we might actually do a live version of this record, and now you actually know what the lyrics are.
Yeah. I mean, I hope like that's just me speculating, because like
Yeah.
it like I don't know what else they're up to, but it's like it seems conspicuous, like let's
Yeah.
just say that. And so fingers crossed, I guess, because
We'll see.
we'll see what these lyrics are actually supposed to be, or 25 years later what they wind up being.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we were talking about like okay, I hear the riff, and we were talking about how like these and all these differences can come about by other people's interpretation of the basic idea that was presented, et cetera, et cetera. Like I couldn't help but to take some of these ideas to a conclusion where, when we are hearing like what's happening on Very Much So and How, which is the newest Skimp album, like when we're hearing that, like this is a perfect, like the way these songs are structured is it's almost like a thesis in that to me, because like I was just listening to it again, like to try to like single things out or whatever, and it's like impossible because I feel like it's so. Now I don't know what y'all are exactly going for, but it's like, to me it's like, what if Hum and Carissa's Weird made a band together? Like, and that's oversimplifying it by a lot.
Yeah.
But I think somewhere in there, if people haven't heard the album, somewhere in there, that's a fair-ish take.
Yeah. I mean, well, the funny thing is, like, the history of like us being a band is like not us ever really knowing where we're going for. There's like influences we can pin, but then it's also just kind of like the process of making it. Like, man, what have we done?
Yeah, yeah. But like, yeah, where I was going with all that is like, because you really can, as a listener, you really can think you have a handle on this song and what this song is and is doing, and then this riff comes out of the right speaker that just like turns it on its ear, and then things start going in this completely other direction. And like, is that just what we were talking about, how like some idea that's pitched and the way somebody else takes it, is that just like an accurate like way to describe like the songwriting practice for the band, which is just like some Rube Goldberg like dominoes experiments, like of one riff starting here and then things just like cascading, or
Well, it's like it's a yes and.
okay.
So the funny thing is that like there is absolutely an element where like ideas are proposed in the act of learning the song,
Hmm.
where it's like kind of we it was written up to this point, and then we're like, oh, I don't know what we should do, and then we just kind of play it until it becomes obvious. And usually those moments are the best ones, and that the answer that we usually settle on is like, what's the most obvious thing that we should do right here? And that is just the question we have to answer: is what is obvious to all of us?
Hmm.
Which sounds more complex than it actually is, in that it's like there's always kind of a riff that we're wanting to play that we're holding back from because it's too simple, and that's usually actually the right answer in those moments. But then the other aspect is that Parker, by and large, shows up to practice with like most of these songs completely written in like three separate parts. So they write a song essentially by writing one part and then just looping it and playing over it until there are three parts. And then the act of song structuring or songwriting kind of happens in when we start learning it. And that the more we played these, the more the structure starts to shift and change and sort of congeal.
Hmm.
So like a lot of this, it's very weird how this album was written, in that like Annihilation 2018 was like the last song to come together, but it was also the first song that Parker ever showed me when they wanted me to start playing bass for like Crisis Management Squad, which was the two-piece thing that precedes Skimp. So like
Hmm.
I've known one of the riffs on the album since 2018, but it was also the last song we finished for the record, which we did like a year straight of just like weekly practices where we just were working on it and trying to play it until it completely felt right. So it was like a meticulously planned structure of like happy accidents. Uh,
Is that the one that has like the all of the vocal overdubs, like the
uh,
try, like,
think
or is that
Annihilation
the one
2018
before
is the
that?
one with the like super like delayed vocals at the end.
Oh, okay.
Uh, the vocal overdubs I think is on like Ian Birkin, just like the three-way thing.
Before, is that the one before that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't, I mean, when you're saying that, like, these songs may, one song may come together in like three separate, like, sections or whatever, that starts to, things start to make a little more sense, like from the outside, like
Yeah.
thinking that, like, oh, like, well, you know how this riff starts this other idea. What if we just poke that riff into this pause or whatever? And so,
Yeah, it's like the like or the process of like making the songs like organic
uh
or
huh,
like sort of like internally autonomous, like the things where they like truly cohere. Those are those social moments,
mm-hmm,
like whereas like the thing that Parker brings to the table is basically the whole song in
mm-hmm,
its essence, but it's not the whole structure.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
It's still a lot. Like I'm trying to like. Like I said, I wanted to listen and I wanted to like sit down almost with like timestamps and get like super nerdy and be like, what about this one riff that comes out of the right speaker, like right here? That's so weird. Like how this, happen and stuff. But, like, yeah, I think, I don't know. I don't think that, I don't think I'm going to hear a better record this year. And
oh.
I, like I am gonna hear a lot of stuff that I really enjoy, but like there's there's so much to that. Like, yeah, I've listened to it several times, and every time it's one of those things where I am like, and you don't have to do this, and normal people don't do stuff like this, but like I'm always like, what's the best? What's the thing about this that I like the best? And it's like the bass parts are so good, like the way the guitars like intertwine and also like just untwine Like
Yeah.
the way they say, let's come together, and then they say, nah, let's, like, and like not just like from a songwriting perspective either, but like the tones on the album are ridiculous. Like it is the most real drum tone that I've heard on an album in 20 years.
It's
Like,
that I have to give infinite credit to our good friend Justin Lemons, who's that drum sounds all him. Like
yeah.
we were pretty involved in mixing, but like we left that to like basically it's like he set it up and then he sat with Miles. Was like, all right, what do you think? And they really sat with it because it was like Justin at the helm of really caring about a good drum sound.
Yeah, I don't even
It's
know like
the
what.
quintessential, recording engineer crisis is does the snare sound like shit? But it was really, yeah, I am in awe of how good the drums sound on the record.
Yeah, it's just I can't even like put like I'm like I don't they sound dry, and like you're just standing, like you're literally just standing in front of the drum set like listening. Like the kick is right there and everything is so separated and you can pick everything out, but it sounds so real, and like it sounds like with the record, but it sounds separate. And the same thing with
Well,
the bass. It's like it sounds with it, but it sounds separate as
and
well.
that element of it in particular, I have to then give credit to Amar Lal and Macro Sound for the master because like the difference was night and day in how it all glued together after we got the master back. We
Oh
were
yeah.
like in awe of
Yeah.
how much it turned it from songs to a record.
Yeah.
In that like and he really cleared up a lot of the mix and it really did kind of bring like the drums into a really great focused presence, but also like it just kind of cohered the entire album together and like every instrument suddenly was like in its own little zone but also perfectly working together. Like I don't know, it was pretty fantastic
Yeah.
to get back. That was a very good day.
Yeah. It's so wild. It's just like like even when I like really like a drum tone, it's like sometimes it's just like it feels more like it's like what our brains think a drum should sound like than when you're actually in a room with drums and that's what drums sound like.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, like no, it's absolutely because Justin, the engineer who recorded us, I used to work with him at McBride's Music and Pawn on the Square here in Denton,
Hmm.
and we sold music together. He got me my job there, so we sat across the table all day from each other. And him being who he is, he wanted to just talk about recording equipment, and then that led to him just talking about like his philosophy on recording and stuff. And he at his core is an audio archivist. Like he actually currently works in a library doing audio archiving right now. He left McBride's a while ago. So like he is an academic archivist, and his recording philosophy follows that completely in line. And that all he wants to do is just accurately depict something, and it's just freaky when he actually shows you what he's doing. Because it's just like I don't know, kind of small careful attention to like mic placement and making sure you just kind of I don't know have a good input. He makes it seem like incredibly simple, but it is just like oh well, it's kind of like I've been thinking about it a lot for like I don't know 18-20 years. So
Yeah.
it's that kind of funny thing about recording.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like there's there's so much philosophy and there's so many like different um like there's so many different ways you can go about it, and then it's like with someone like me it's like I'm just like setting up the mics as anxious as a human being could possibly be before
Yeah.
hitting record, and I'm just like that's gonna do. you know
Well,
uh,
yeah, because like earnestly, it is. It's gonna do. Like that's
yeah.
how recording goes, and
Yeah.
also like part of like what I think Justin's perspective is like sort of refreshing for me is that he also kind of is, to a certain element, embraces the idea. It's like, this is just how a recording sounds. A recording is a reflection of a moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like what you capture is what you capture. There are plenty of records that are made with like weird mistakes or quirks or things that aren't exactly perfect, and you know what? That's what we end up loving about them. So like, to also record with someone who has like, you know, a fastidious archivist sort of perspective on the act of recording, but also is like entirely relaxed about the spirit of recording.
Yeah.
It was very easy to spend 14-hour days working with him.
Yeah. Wow. What was different about that experience than you know, doing a Fleshborn record, like, other than like the obvious thing that anybody could guess, probably being just like that you didn't feel like you had to just bang them all out like one after the other.
That I was going to say. That's sort of the thing. It's like, a lot of our recordings in the past have been done with our good friend Michael Briggs, who is also a master of efficiency.
Absolutely.
And so, like, the beauty of recording with Michael is that you can basically just get like the complete output, like, just done in a day. Like, you come back to mix it another day, and really, if you have your, you know, material rehearsed well enough, like, there's no reason you need to spend that much longer tracking it. But like, the you know, the other aspect is like, previous bands that we were in, the exigence of the recording was a lot in that same spirit, where it's like, let's just get it done, let's get it out there, let's push, go forward, move. Whereas we spent so much time with learning the Skimp record. Like, every act of it was so methodically paced that it sort of just intuitively followed that we would record it in a different way. And like, as a result, in the sort of way that was like intentionally very methodically paced. Yeah, to an extent, it was also like, it was a totally different studio environment, where we went to the Echo Lab, which is like south of Denton, technically maybe Argyle. And so it's like it's one of the rather, like, bougie analog studios in the area, but it was really founded by like three guys from Denton in the 90s with a bunch of business loans, and then they just have been successfully running it since. So it's like really fucking quaint and really, really nice inside, but it's in like a giant barn in the middle of nowhere. So you're like, you get out there early in the morning and you just hear chickens, and you drive on a private road, like, that you have to like go way, way out of your way to find. So it's really, really pleasant in that essence, that we were just kind of spending a fair portion of time focusing on it very, very granularly.
Yeah.
And so, the pacing and the rhythm of it are really the fundamental difference, because but to a certain extent also, like, a lot of the influences that we had from this were sort of like, 90s Chicago post-rock.
Sure.
So it made sense to do a more like, it wasn't an all analog recording, but it was in that kind of context of like, this is to an extent a sort of Chicago style recording scenario.
Did you do the recording like more or less like the same sort of like all the drums first, all the guitars next, or whatever? Was it still that same thing, or were you like, was everything just ready to record and you were just doing things like song by
Yeah,
song, or?
we tracked the guitar, bass, and drums, and then on Oh No Way, also the piano live for
Oh,
the
okay.
record. Parker overdubbed the piano on all of the songs except for Oh No Way, but on Oh No Way, Mariah played it along with us because it was just the piano parts were still sort of nebulously developed at the time of recording. Whereas Mariah knew Own Away, and also it's like the structure of the song. So to play it live, you kind of have to have someone playing a piano.
Ah,
And we very, very, very much wanted to track everything live together because we have a lot of very like subtle tempo shifts that we intentionally do here and there.
mm-hmm.
So like really following Miles was the impetus for it's like there was very minimal overdubbing. There was overdubs of acoustic and a few electric guitar tracks, and then all of the vocals, obviously. But
Oh, okay. That's wild. Like, so the basic instruments were all tracked live. Was that some? Is that is that like usually how you would do something like in Fleshborn or something like that? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
S-
yeah. We would mostly, especially with Michael, like he had the ability to just track everybody live as quickly as he worked. So
Yeah.
we would, for the most part, at least do that. Though there was a lot more of like overdubbing and faking and or like editing. Editing is the proper term. Editing steps in the previous recordings we've done. But this one, there was like some, we were recording into Pro Tools, so there was, editing, taking out noise and making sure things worked. Or like, oh, this is a little late. Can we nudge it? It's like, we weren't too good at Pro Tools because we all knew different DAWs, ironically.
Sure.
But yeah, like for the most part, throughout a lot of our bands, we've definitely tracked live. There was a few contexts, and then coincidentally, the first Skimp record is one of them where it was tracked separately. So for Hey All Right, we recorded with our friend Rubio, who has more of that kind of workflow.
Mm-hmm.
So we tracked the guitar and drums on. It was like clean guitar and drums, and then we overdubbed the dirty electric guitar, and then the bass, and then the vocals.
Yeah.
So that was done piecemeal, and it was a different context of recording for us, coincidentally, and so it was kind of fun to do because we recorded on like 3 guitar amps a piece, like while we were tracking our electric distorted guitars.
Yeah. It's like it definitely makes like you know, you hear about it a lot more with like a band like Fleshborn. Like, yeah, we're doing this live. Like everybody's, we're
Yeah,
going, and then like just kind of imagining like the Skimp record being done live and y'all like busting out 6-minute songs like live
yeah,
is kind
it's
of
annoying.
it was annoying. So
It's really fucking annoying to mess up the very end of a song and be like, all right, so where can we start this from? It's like a minute and a half before. It's the last natural moment to do a punch in.
sure, like that big crash or whatever.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
fuck.
yeah.
Or the other thing that we did was the way the workflow worked was we had to like print all of it live. So we had to record to the master track while playing through the entire song through the board.
Mm.
So we were also adjusting things like without automation,
Oh,
um, which is even funnier to fuck up because when it's the last song you're finishing to print and you have to do Annihilation 2018 and you're trying to like manipulate a Roland RE 301 tape echo to like cascade just right, and you keep fucking it up, and it's 2:20 in the morning, and everyone just looks so tired and looks so miserable at you. It's like, oh, there's different rigors of this method.
yeah. You're almost like, do we need that effect?
No,
Like,
we needed it, and
yeah,
we
no,
talked
no.
ourselves into it, and I'm gonna do it. God damn it,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. The later it gets, actually, the more it's like some people would be less insistent, but it's like from a creator's point of view, you're like, that's when you get more insistent. Like, no, this is gonna happen. You
Yeah,
know?
because also I've wasted so much time on this already that there's no way I'm not doing this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. From the musician's perspective, you're like that. The decision to not do that would be like a rest of your life. Like wake up at 2 and
Regret. Yeah. I
like
should have done that
ah,
delay.
yeah, yeah. We only needed one more try.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. And so, like, that was another fun element of it, in that, like, on top, we had rehearsed the record for like a year straight. So, like, by the time we went to record, we were pretty locked in with it, which was pretty nice, and also the only way it was going to work.
mm-hmm.
Which is why we rehearsed so goddamn much. But like, there was still, you still are human. There are still
Yeah,
errors, and we progressed through tracking it pretty briskly and got some vocals done. We had like 2 separate sessions in 2 days. So we like had the whole album tracked and some vocals finished by the first session, then had to finish the vocals and mix it in the second. So like it was, they were all very individually long days. We definitely put a lot into it, but it was also like we had tried so much to prepare on our end that it was like there wasn't that much that we couldn't get past, and it was mostly just like, let's just try, let's just really try. So we were trying to just keep our standards really high, which is the main reason why it took so long.
yeah,
Because there were a lot of moments also where we were like, no, no, no. Previously, we would have been fine with that, but let's get this right, you know?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I It shows in the album. Like it shows. There
I
isn't
appreciate that.
anything that there's nothing that feels like it was left to chance, or like that it was like there's nothing that just like squeaked by or whatever, like um when when you're in your shoes, like you individually as band members, like you may have slightly different, like, well, there was this one part that I personally, just this one thing I personally could have, out of like 6 people doing stuff, maybe you will have that, but like from a listener, it's like you're like just like, yeah, everybody laid down like their best performance on this, and yeah, I don't know,
Well, and
like,
it's that you're always going to have the nitpick
yeah,
mindset, but like, because we still did, for like a while after recording it too, we're like, oh God, there's a breath sound right there. We forgot,
oh,
you know?
that's funny because like, yeah, that's always the kind of, yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, so that's the thing, right? Like whether it's art or whether it's music, and this hangs a lot of people up. This hung me up forever. Like when I was in A Chamele, like I wrote like 5 songs in like 2 years. Like that was
Hmm.
literally it, because I was just obsessive about like I had a part and I'm like, the next part has to be, this has to be perfect, or and it was this whole thing, and and I can still find myself doing that to a degree, right? But it's just like none of this is like art is, it's about like you're creating something, but it's also about like you're making decisions. And
Yeah.
that's like the decision there, like there's a breath there. But you're like, me, I'm kind of like, that's kind of cool. Like that breath before the thing. But also, it's a decision. Do you leave it or do you take it out? It's just like when you have like stops in a song and
Hmm.
you can hear like someone's fingers go across the strings or whatever. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
you make a decision. Do you cut that and it sounds like tighter, or like do you leave that and it sounds human and it
That,
sounds like,
exactly.
you
Yeah.
know? And
Well, and like there's a moment on the Skimp record that I elate, like I find glee within, um, because of leaving that kind of like human, like the like slight imperfection, but not imperfection. It's like a stylistically human element, and it's at the end of like the really loud part in FKA, the fourth song, and
mm,
it's like, and like I like at the time that Miles like plays a flam to close it, I like slightly like I'm like just behind on like choking the guitar, and it
Hmm.
stops at exactly the last moment to cut off, and it just like the fact that I was able to do that in that moment, I am so like personally proud. And
Yeah.
it's not even playing a note. It's how I stopped playing a note that I'm excited about. But
Yeah.
like still,
Yeah. Yeah. You're just like that. Like
that fucking part.
that's
Yeah.
not gonna happen. Like four out of five times, that's not gonna
Yeah.
happen. No matter how much I practice.
It's like that
Yeah.
total insane imperfection is like the best moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I love stuff like that. And I mean,
Yeah.
there's other instances on the album which like I could have thought that you were going there, but these instances are much more, it's obviously it's intentional or whatever, right? Where there's
Hmm.
like stops but then the bass plays like one extra note or something and
Oh
you're
yeah.
like that's fucking brilliant. Like there's this like for some reason there's just this like distorted bass note after everything else stops and you're like that's so fucking good. Like
Yeah. Like,
and
well, and like really playing on that like sort of expectation level of like when pauses break, or like when things do feel awkward, or when notes are like too close together in separate parts.
mhm.
Like the dissonance that like a lot of art things find, I really enjoy. But yeah, it's that is definitely also, as we were talking about before, the elements that come together in like playing. But like I think the exact bass part you were talking about, that is another instance of like, no, that's just a crazy Parker thought. Like
Yeah.
Parker just came up with that one.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's almost like one of those things where you know you it could have happened by accident and then it's like no way that's so cool like do that
Yeah,
again on purpose this time or
exactly.
something but
Yeah, well, and that's the beautiful irony of like trying to meticulously rehearse these kind of things, is that those mistakes become ingrained, and thus it blurs the line between like what is intentional and what is improvisational, really.
mm,
In that like the little quirks that you find and pick up along the way become not quirks at all. They become exactly, the routine,
yeah,
especially when you get a little obsessive with it.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean it's I don't know this is definitely one of those albums where it's like you know I I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall at some of these practices or something. Even though I'm getting a pretty like decent view of how things were, it sounds awesome. But I are there like tapes coming for this or anything like that, or is it just like digital for the time being, and or is there something
Um,
else happening that you can't talk about just yet?
well, currently we have a vinyl pre-order through the Ghost is Clear Records.
Oh, okay. So I just went
Uh,
to your band camp and I didn't see anything,
Yeah,
so
we
I
don't have
didn't.
any merch ourselves at the moment,
Okay.
but I know that we're basically just gonna see what Bobby wants to do. But where our plan at least is to have tapes and CDs made by, I believe, June 19th, ideally, because we're going out of town for some shows, and then on the 21st we're playing our album release, technically speaking. Um, so um, definitely going to have merch by June 21st, and we'll have it online as soon as we have it. But I personally would really like to make CDs. I'm a huge CD proponent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this record's audio quality also merits like accurate reproduction.
Sure.
So a CD would be most definitely in the pipeline, and then coincidentally, I probably will just make a tape because I literally just make tape masters. My friend has a tape dupe, so we will definitely have that together as well.
Awesome. Awesome.
I was actually just making a tape master before I hopped on this call.
Awesome. So June is when all that stuff is looking to come about.
Yeah, our
Yeah.
release date was basically when is it ready and in Parker's hands. It is now out that next Friday.
Yeah.
So that was
Awesome.
the logic behind it. Is we wanted to put it out as soon as possible.
Well, I like I was saying before I started hitting record, I could sit here and chat with you like all night. We have definitely done that in like basements in Texas, or
Oh
living
yeah.
rooms in Texas before. Um, but just like an overview. So, I mean, this ain't even gonna come close to your bands, but we've seen releases from Arby's, Big Hand, Big Knife, Crisis Management Squad, Fleshborn, Infernal Legions of Mordor, Joy Soars, Plunge, Sacred Attention. I think that was the last one before Skimp, right? Or was there something
Yeah.
I missed? Okay.
I think at least as far as bands, I am currently in another band that hasn't released anything. So
Okay. And then there was Wep and Whimper.
yeah.
Is Sacred Attention still a thing? Are y'all working on something new or?
Yeah. Actually played a show last night in Sacred, and
Awesome.
Skimp played last Friday. So I'm really tired right now. Yeah. So we've got something in the pipeline. We're going to try to record it ourselves.
Awesome. Awesome. And you said you have some shows coming up for Skimp, leading up to the release show and all that in June.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that
The ones out of town I don't think are announced yet or planned, or I maybe they're keeping me out of the loop. But the one I can definitely talk about is on June 21st at Rubber Gloves Rehearsal Studios, where basically every year our friend Will Mecca books a big birthday party. And so he'll book like 10 bands and host it at clubs. And so I think this year Bursting is one of the noted bands. There's also 8 others that I can't rattle off the top of my head right now, but it's going to be really good, and it always is very good. And then long ago, Will basically had floated the idea of, hey, your album release should be my birthday party. And we said, yeah. So that's our motivation behind it. So we're going to play the album in full, which is going to be fun.
Oh, dang.
Because we've never played a set that long.
Yeah, that's wild. That's going to be awesome. I wish I could be there for that. That's hopefully there'll be video.
We'll find out.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we should touch on before we take off? Like I said, I really could just sit here and chat, but
Yeah.
I gotta make dinner and all this stuff like the usual.
I gotta go to the grocery store pretty much the moment I hang up. I feel you very deeply.
I'm doing a pretty simple thing, but it's still a thing.
For me, Sunday's my day of spending like 3 hours cooking something. So I'm basically going to be eating at like 10 or something at this point.
No.
So yeah, it'll be fine. I get a sandwich before, this is my return to work routine.
And that was my conversation with Donovan Ford. Thank you so much, Donovan, for taking the time to chat with me. I'd be lying if I didn't say that sometimes I use the podcast as an excuse to just call my friends and chat with them for an hour, and that's exactly what this felt like. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening, and wherever you are, stay safe, take care, and do good things.